Okay, well, thank you everybody for coming. I truly appreciate it, and so does everybody in the neighborhood. We're going to go ahead and start with some introductions. So if you could briefly introduce yourself, I'd love that.
Alejandro with the Mayor's Office.
David Garcia from the Office of Commissioner Manolo Reyes.
I'm Maria, this is my partner Becky. We live over here on Southwest 30th Avenue and 2nd Street.
I'm Manny Hartman, a resident here at District 4. I also sit on the Community Relations Board and also a union member and help out as a communications liaison for Martha in the group. Thank you.
David Bonilla, I'm an organizer with Mr. Richardson.
Hi, good evening everyone. Carlos Castellanos, I'm the Police Legami Net Commander for the Legami Net Service Area.
Also, Luis Callejas with Representative Richardson's office.
And I'm David Richardson, the current state representative for District 113 and a candidate for Congress.
Rafael and Indali, we're both part of the Little Havana Association and part of the community, obviously.
I'm Julian. I'm probably the one resident here from East Little Havana.
No.
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 Oh, okay, there we go. Not alone today.
It's okay.
We're all here. We're now the greater Little Havana neighborhood.
Hi, Lindsay Corrales. I live in the Shenandoah neighborhood, and I also work with the Live Healthy Little Havana initiative.
Raiza Fernandez. I am a resident, business owner, and part of the Live Healthy Little Havana.
I'm Al Crespo. I'm a blogger.
I'm Eileen Higgins. I am a neighbor across the river, and I am actually a candidate for County Commission in District 5, which makes up most of this area.
Thank you so much for everybody. So we're going to start today with some special guests that we have, and I would like Manny Hartman to please introduce our guest, and then we'll continue with the rest of the agenda.
Oh, great, thank you. Hello everyone, thank you for coming, and would like to first go ahead and because of the time, and want to thank our candidates that are running for office. Thank you for coming to our meeting. We are a very active group, and if you do stick around for later on, you will see what we're doing. We have Commander Castellanos here that is helping us out with a couple of situations that we have in the neighborhood. Most importantly, that we're going to talk about, Martha will fill us in, will be the Home Depot situation. So I'd like to introduce Miss Eileen Higgins, who's running for County Commission.
Wow, okay. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for inviting me, Manny. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm running for County Commission for a couple of reasons. As I've lived here in Miami, I've watched over the time, you know the deal, our traffic is getting worse, our transit is, well, it is getting worse. I mean, it's not expanding. But in the meantime, we also have a quality of life issue with the cost of housing. And as our wages, whether you're on senior citizen on a fixed salary or a recent college graduate, we have salaries that are quite low here, and we have costs of housing that are just going through the roof, right? Families that lived forever in Shenandoah, their kids are having a hard time. They would they'd not be able to buy a house in Shenandoah. So we have some what I call this nexus around quality of life, where we have low wage jobs, we have high cost of living, and we have traffic that sort of bogs us all down. And when we work on any one of those things, we're helping with all three of those things. So I would like to be a new point of view and a new perspective to try to help resolve some of those issues. So let me just tell you a little bit about myself and about some of the things that I've done here in Miami. I'm an engineer by training, so I have a problem solver's brain in there. But I'm also a small business owner. I've worked for some large companies when I was younger, but now I have a small business with my sister and my dad. But over the years, as I was working, I made a pivot from working all the time to working part of the time so that I could give back to the community. And part of that change was about 15 years ago when I became the director of the Peace Corps in Belize. And that was a really life-changing experience to be on the front lines of figuring out how to lift people out of poverty. So I have really seen the economy from both sides, right? What it takes to make a big company work and how hard it is to deal with intrinsic poverty and get people to where they need to be to have a good quality of life. And we know we have both of those things here in Miami, right? Sometimes the mayor actually calls it the two Miamis, right? We have the haves and the have-nots. And obviously I don't come from a famous family with, you know, a legacy of you know, brothers and sisters and cousins and aunts who have been an elected official. So I come with things at a fresh perspective. And my goal for all of us is that we get a little bit of balance, right? We're not going to stop development, that's crazy, right? We have an economy that's very much based on development and construction. But we, the people, have been left out of that in most of the decisions. So we're just out of balance, right? Where the developers seem to get everything. We don't even get scaffolding to walk under while they're constructing whatever building. Flagler Street and First Street, I don't even know how to describe them. I can't even use the word street anymore. They've been turned into cow paths, swamps and lakes, and for 2 years plus going on there. We have the same thing in our neighborhood. They've given us 1 lane FDOT. They don't seem to know how to construct anything, but they certainly know how to create lakes and wreck neighborhoods and public transportation issues. So it's just another example of where things are not taken, we are not considered where we walk, where our bus stops are, whether or not we get enough park space with the overdevelopment. Does this construction destroy our small business owners, which are our job creators? Well, you know what it's like on Flagler Street and First Street. Those businesses are gone. They're not coming back. And they provided livelihoods for their families and for the people that worked for them. And we have not had loud enough voices complaining for us. And so my goal is not to be unrealistic. People refer to me as progressive, but I can tell you I'm a pretty practical progressive. I do believe that it's, you know, equality matters, like an equity matters. But if we don't have economic opportunity, you know, we have a lot of equity and love going on, but we need to live a good life. But we are left out of the decisions of the county. Affordable housing, this will kind of be my last thing because I know we're in a rush, but we have a county commission that has not chosen to do anything that other cities in the country are doing to create workforce housing. 2 years ago, they voted down. Some of them voted against inclusive zoning. For those of you that don't know what inclusive zoning is, if you're building a larger structure, a small percentage of that structure would have to be dedicated to affordable workforce housing. So it could be smaller apartments that working professionals or working families could afford. If your building is so fancy that you don't want that in your building, you pay into the Affordable Housing Trust, and then the county can build that for you. The county didn't have an Affordable Housing Trust until a group of community activists demanded that they form one, and it took us 3 years to get it, 2 years to get it formed, and 3 years to get it funded. So we have $8 million in there now, and if we can implement mandatory inclusive zoning, every new piece of construction can start to either have housing within it or fund that trust. So that work has been done to begin to do that. Our county commissioners, the ones that we have serving now, voted against that. Not all of them, but some of them. I can tell you that I would reopen that discussion because we have got to build housing we can afford to live in. The other thing we're not doing, and the county has refused to look at, which cities like Seattle are looking at, 20% of everything you're going to see, every house, every apartment, is not available to be lived in. So when we look at all this construction, we think, wow, they're building all these things. In our county, 20% of the units are not available for you to live in, for me to live in. They're bank accounts, right? And many people use those units for, you know, they come from countries where keeping money in Venezuela, that's not very reliable, right? So you'd rather have it safely in the United States or Brazil or Russia or the Ukraine. Let's give everyone the benefit of the doubt that these are all clean purchases. They're really just trying to save their money, but they're not renting that unit and they never use it. So what they're doing is they're inflating prices for us but we can't rent those units. So cities like Seattle and others are looking at different property tax rates, right? We have property taxes for the people that live here, and then if you have a unit that you refuse to rent or live in, you have a different rate. And we should look at that, right? It doesn't force those people to pay that amount. They can go lower down if they choose to make that unit available. So when people say we can't solve the affordable housing crisis, they are not looking at best practices, and they're not looking at best practices because they're pretty entrenched with the developers here.
Can I ask one question?
Yes.
How about Airbnbs? What is your opinion on
So,
Airbnbs?
there's probably no right answer to that question. I live in a building that has forbidden Airbnb rentals, and I think we're reasonably successful at keeping track of it, although I'm sure we fail from time to time. There probably has to be some reasonable regulation on how we look at these things, you know, who's coming in, how often are they there, what's the frequency of change, is there 20 people in a house, because right, I mean there's a right answer.
A compromise.
There's a compromise that people who need to can activate their home for a little extra income but not ruin the neighborhood or the building. And actually in Brickell we're building the very first building that's all Airbnb-able. So when you buy that unit, you know what you're getting into, right? You know that you, when you're not in town, can rent your unit, but you also know that your neighbors are. So it's kind of this mutual, so it's interesting how that is forming, you know, there's
It's a commodity for the sellers, of
right.
course it
So
is.
if you're a person that travels a lot for work and you think, well, when I'm away, wouldn't it be nice to rent my apartment? You're not doing it in a building where there's there's lots of kids and families and or in a neighborhood like that. So disruptive technologies, or industries, they are what they are. They disrupt, and sometimes they make us miserable for a bit. Waze is something that could make us miserable. It cuts us through, you know, as neighbors, cuts us through a lot of neighborhoods. But eventually all that settles out, and I think with Airbnb we'll come
Like
to a
Uber.
happy medium.
Uber settled
Yeah.
down, and I think we're all happy with that.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Thank you.
so there's lots that can be done. What I can tell you about me is I have a head that can, chipmunks keep the wheels turning. So I promise to process. I don't know everything. I don't know everything. I won't know everything on the first day I'm elected. I won't know everything when I finish my term. But I'm reasonably smart. I'm happy to accept information and process it. But I can also tell you, I'm not going to process it just here. I'm going to process it here with the values that my parents instilled in me, so that we get some representation as our city grows. And the one thing that will never be part of any decision is a handout expecting me or my family to be enriched of our tax dollars. So May 22nd is election day. If anyone wants my phone number, I can give that to you, and you can call me at any time.
There are flyers on the table?
There's flyers on the
All right,
table.
then.
So
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Eileen.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you for coming. Next, I'd like to introduce the gentleman that has served in Tallahassee, crazy Tallahassee, since 2012. He's been in office serving Representative Richardson, please correct me if I'm wrong, Miami Beach, Eastern Little Havana, and
Downtown Miami.
Downtown Miami as well.
North Bay Village.
Great. And the man can speak as good as Spanish as it's amazing.
Yeah.
I've seen him in action a couple of times. So with further ado, Representative Richardson, please come on in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, happy to be here. Gosh, it's hard to believe that it was 6 years ago that I won this election, and it's just gone, 6 years ago or 25 pounds ago. So it's crazy that 6 years passed so quickly, but I have really enjoyed my work. A lot of people know that I had a successful consulting practice and retired from that about 10 years ago when I realized I wanted to pursue some other activities, and got involved in some political things behind the scenes, and then decided to run for office when the state rep seat opened up in 2012, and ran really a sprint from sort of like what you're doing, Eileen. I filed the day before the closing cut off, and about 13 weeks later I won. That's a little bit more time than you've got, but it was a 4-way race, an open primary, so everybody voted. There were no Republicans that filed at that time, and became, you probably already know, became the first openly gay to ever win a seat in the Florida legislature when I won in 2012, and that's gone pretty well. I remember the next day, one of the journalists quoted a pretty far-right Republican saying that he would be wise to come to Tallahassee and just stay quiet. That didn't work out so well for them. And things have gone pretty well. I have developed a voice that is listened to by both sides of the aisle, my own leadership and also the leadership in the Republican Party. In my sophomore year, I was the floor leader, which means I managed the action on the floor for my entire caucus, which is not a bad gig for a sophomore in their second term, and now running for Congress in this open seat, which I think there are about 500 people that have decided to run. But the field is thinning as I expected it would last summer when I decided to run. We're going to know by Friday at noon who's running, because this is the qualifying week. So qualifying opened this morning and will go through noon on Friday. So anyone who doesn't get their paperwork filed by Friday at noon will not be in the race. So we're getting ready to see what's going to happen. The district itself is a very Democratic seat now. It's changed quite a bit. Hillary won the seat by 20 points. But more importantly, Patrick Murphy beat Marco Rubio in the race. So that tells you, because this is Marco Rubio's home base, so with his widespread support, Patrick Murphy did beat him. Come on in. Thank you. So I'm really excited to be running. I'm also a progressive candidate and am running on Medicare for All. I think I'm the only candidate in the race that has expressed an interest, and not only expressed it but demonstrated in that last summer I took the time to actually file a bill in the Florida House, 55 pages, and it took a lot of time to write, to initiate the conversation for Medicare for All. I knew the bill wasn't going to even be heard, but it did get a lot of conversation going, and that's really what I wanted to do. Sometimes, we file bills not because they're going to pass, but because they'll further a conversation. Many of you know I've done a lot of work in the area of prison reform. It's 3 years ago. I had never stepped foot in a prison in my life, but there is a unique law here in the state of Florida that allows any sitting legislator to show up unannounced and walk in, and I've used that law to effect, I believe, a lot of change. I went on my first visit with one of my colleagues, a Republican from Tampa, and we spent the morning doing a female prison and the afternoon doing an adult prison, and also happened to be where the youthful offenders are housed. So we both left there feeling pretty bad about the situation, and I decided to use my former forensic audit skills to try to uncover some stuff. And I started with just one little unique project. I thought I could get to the bottom of some alleged hazing incidents that were occurring at a youthful offender camp, and so I developed really an audit plan to get to the truth on that, and discovered how all of it was occurring and the timing, and then went to the secretary and encouraged her, really with my evidence, to close the prison as a youthful offender. So it's one of the examples when people say to me, why do you want to be in Tallahassee because Democrats can't get anything done? I say, well, I've closed a prison. So, it's not everybody that's done that. But the work has been very effective, and I've really shaken up so many parts of the Department of Corrections that has only a sliver of it has been reported, and the department keeps me informed of significant events so that I'm not surprised. There was a big announcement today which I'm not happy about, but they started giving me briefings on it a month ago. But the departments were significantly underfunded, both corrections and DJJ, this year in the budget cycle, and corrections has got to find $84 million, and so what's being cut is programming and educational opportunities, and that's the area where we're already shortage and transitioning so that we can try to reduce the recidivism. So I'm pretty upset about that, but that was just announced this afternoon publicly. So, but there's a lot of good work to be done at the federal level on that issue, and I want to continue my work there. So I expect I'll be doing a lot of work in healthcare and so forth. The race itself is going to be a tough race. There's, it's worth saying, Donna Shalala's in the race, and everybody's talking about Donna Shalala, and she's going to raise a lot of money. But the truth is that I've raised a lot of money, and I've done it in a very different way. I don't have 1,000 people that can give me $2,700. I don't even have 100 people that can give me, but my grassroots fundraising is completely on fire. The emails, if you're not on my email list and you want to be pestered, get on the email list. Most people that don't even, they say, oh, I get all these emails. I'm like, well, if you don't, you can unsubscribe. And they're like, no, but they're interesting. But I will tell you that the people giving me $5 and $10 and $15 and $25 all over the country is really phenomenal. We are now past, I think, 37,000 online contributions since I started last July, and my average contribution is about $24. And I'm raising money all over Florida and beyond, and I was just for the quarter ending March 31st, I was number 6 in the nation so that's among Democrats, Republicans, incumbent members of Congress, and any candidate. I was number 6. There's about 1,200 people running for Congress right now, and I was number 6 in the nation for grassroots fundraising. For the quarter ending December 31st, I was number 10 on the list. Nancy Pelosi was number 9, so she beat me by $192. So you can see that my grassroots fundraising has gone really well, and I'm very, very proud of it. And so I think that I'm going to be raising money in a very different way than the other candidates, and I think that's one of the things that will distinguish me, in addition to some of the issues I have taken, for example, Medicare for All. So with that, if anybody has a question, I'd love to take a question. If not, I know you've got a lot of things going for the rest of the meeting.
Yeah. Anybody have any questions for the representative?
Yeah, I have a question. Representative Richardson. So, one thing. Today in the news, before I even read it, I was posting a picture of the construction work on Flagler. I know the Representative Jose Javier tried to do something in reference to compensation. Where is that at in the state? And what has been the follow-up with you in reference to the construction? Because it just feels very, very slow. It feels like they do not have the right amount of people working at the project as a contractor for FDOT. And how much money has it spent, right? Because we are threatened that this might happen again with a project on Southwest 8th Street and 7th Street, which I am in the advisory group. And so I just want that one, if you could answer that. And then the second is, how would you bring funding from the federal government down to our district for jobs, for education, in reference to juvenile offenses and training and the criminal justice system here in Miami? Because I think we have to find a way to, transition from housing people into training and education and rising and making those level of education in our city and in our county grow, right? We want to educate more people and graduate more people. So those are the questions. I know they're heavy, but
that's okay. So the first thing is, I have been heavily involved in that construction project and going to meetings, and of course Lewis was going to those meetings when I was in Tallahassee, and prodding them to move along. I lived through the same exact construction situation with Alton Road in Miami Beach, and it was 2 years, and I stayed on top of FDOT all along the way. The problem with Flagler is that project is more complicated than what we even had in Alton Road in Miami Beach, and that there was a lot of underground work that had to be done. But having said that, because I've been in a number of meetings, I know there has been dissatisfaction with the contractor, but I'm also have been briefed that they also know the rules in their contract, so they know how many people they can stage out there and still comply with the contract. And and perhaps the contract should have been formed a little differently, you know? And also sometimes when you just hire the lowest bidder, they're not necessarily the best contractor for the job. And that's a problem with contracting with governments, whether it's at the state level, the federal level, or whatever. Sometimes you get what you pay for. I am too very worried about the Cayocho project, and I've been in a number of those meetings, and in fact got called to over a year ago to try to further the conversation because there wasn't, as you know, a good dialogue going on between FDOT and the community, and so I was able to facilitate that in a better way. The 8th Street project is probably 3.5 to 4 years away, but it's not too soon to be working on this. And you know, they have reopened the possibilities of what plans and so forth. The last thing I would want to see is any issues that are not resolved before they get the bulldozers out, because that's what I had at Alton Road. The bulldozers were on the street and the people were up in arms about the plan. And I actually convinced FDOT to reopen the plan, and the plan was revised after that. But you know, it's costly, quite frankly, and it also delayed the project a little bit. So we don't want that. And there's a lot of different ideas about what Cayocho should look like, whether or not it should remain a one-way street or whether or not it should be more like a main street and have two-way traffic. And you know, that's something that the community and FDOT are going to have to come together and look at traffic flows and all those other things. But part of the mix in all of this is public transportation, which is sorely needed in this county. It's probably the large city in this country that has the poorest public transportation, in my opinion. But yeah, I'm worried about, I see these small businesses. To your specific point on the bill that was filed by Jose Javier Rodriguez, the senator, I don't know if you know it, but I filed a similar bill in the House. It was a little bit different language than his because I felt like there were some other areas that could be enhanced. And Nick Duran, who's also a state representative for a little bit, is very interested as well. And he came to me and asked me if he could run the bill. So I let him run my bill. And so we got the bill heard in one committee in the House, which quite frankly I saw as a pretty good accomplishment because I didn't think that they would hear the bill at all. But it was heard and passed unanimously. I don't know if the bill was heard in the Senate, but the bill didn't pass.
One committee as well.
In the Senate? Okay. So, you know, I think it's a difficult issue because once you start paying small businesses, it becomes tricky, you know, in terms of you're going to pay if a small business has 15 employees but not 16 employees. So it's a tricky one, and I don't know that anybody could develop a model that would be perfect. But now to your second point, you ask about funding for the local community. Obviously I'd love to bring back as much money as I can at the federal level as I have at the state level. A lot of the issues you mentioned are really funds that come through the state government. So for example, the federal government has a certain match for education that they send to the Tallahassee, and then that gets redistributed, if you will. One of the things that is sadly missing, and it's not just federal and local and state, it's everybody, is we need to have more programs for youth to keep them off the streets and keep them engaged and keep them out of our prisons, quite frankly. You know, there used to be more programs here in the county if you look back 10, 12, 15 years, and a lot of that money has been cut. So maybe it has to be a partnership of the federal government and the county and the state and everybody coming up with something. And it's not just our community, it's really all over the state and all over the country that those kind of summer programs have been cut. And we need to be investing there so that, you know, a 16-year-old needs to have a little bit of what my grandmother used to call walking around money. Yeah. You know, and if they don't, they're going to find a way to get a little walk. See more programs like that so that we can keep people engaged in activities that are beneficial to our community. I don't know if that helps to answer.
Yeah.
Great.
Sure.
Thank you,
Thank you so much.
Richardson. In the spirit of time, as you know, because we do have the issue that we want to tackle and speak about, as we have a couple of guests, that have joined us since the representative began speaking. We'd like to move the meeting along to the Home Depot situation, but please,
And
there
you're very
is-
welcome to remain because.
yeah, you're welcome to
It's
remain.
Good, so
important
I
that
just
you're
thank you
aware
for
of
allowing me,
it.
I'm gonna go to another meeting, but David is with me and he's gonna stay here for the duration of the meeting.
And he'll take notes.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. And if there's anything that we can do to help, let us know, either my official office or on the other side, just let me know, okay? Thank you so much.
Thank you.